David Libman to make another print of the Kennedy photo and to enlarge the contact sheets which we had. And David came back to me and he said, "Dad, I think we have a show here." And that's how it started. We actually, it was like mining gold and finding nuggets. He was working at Lab 1, and every week or so I'd go down there and there'd be 3 or 4 or 5 more prints done. And, it was just like, I said, where was that picture taken? And as I've been around them more and more, I've started to remember what went on for me that summer and the events that happened. And, I started looking at maps again and trying to figure out the route I took on my motorcycle. This was basically, it was a young guy's early on adventure, riding from Illinois to Mexico City on his Triumph motorcycle.
Now, how did you happen to be in Mexico City in 1962?
I don't know how that was. I remember, I had a social conscience, and I had an adventurous consciousness. I liked the West. I liked, cowboy and Indian stuff, and I liked Mexican border stuff, Pancho Villa stuff, and I liked Mexico, and I basically liked diversity, and I liked people of other cultures, and I think I was becoming a Western Hemispherian. I probably studied more at that time about Africa, but I had been to Mexico, close to Mexico, I should say. I hadn't been to Mexico when I drove from Connecticut to California in the summer of '60 to work in a cannery, and I was in El Centro, California, and I remember late one night driving through there, just being all kind of people, Mexicans and white people, some black people, some Asians running the joint, and it just was cool, and that was, so I don't know where the interest came from or how it was, but I ended up in '62 wanting to go to Mexico, and I applied to this Mexico City college, which was mostly Americans, and a lot of them were kind of hip-oriented, beat. Well, there was serious Spanish students too, and Spanish history. There's all kind of people there, I guess. I applied. I got in. My parents gave me permission. I had this motorcycle.
You're still listening to your parents.
I can't remember where I even bought the motorcycle, but I had that. I had a 1956 Triumph touring bike, Thunderbird. It has the place on the front fender for the license plate, like British style. And in June, I got on the bike. I rode to Peoria to my girlfriend's house, her parents, just outside of Peoria, and spent the night there. And then I remember I drove to, went through Texarkana and slept in Little Rock the next night. The next night I was in Laredo, Texas. No, I was in Victoria, Texas. The next morning I crossed the border at Brownsville, Matamoros. And that night I was in Ciudad Victoria. And at 2 in the morning on the next morning, I thought it was only midnight. I left and I got to Mexico City late that afternoon. Worn out and, all that, my skin peeling off, all burned on my face. And obviously there was a lot of stuff that went on in that whole period of time that for a young guy was pretty exciting. But I didn't start taking any pictures in Mexico until I was south of the border, and there's a checkpoint, and there's a few pictures of a checkpoint where I have pictures of my motorcycle and some guys standing around, 2 little kids, one of them in a military cap, a woman on a pickup truck, an old Chevy station wagon under a kind of a lean-to hut of a garage. And that's when I started. I just took pictures. I don't know, every once in a while I started to take these pictures, and as you can see, there's a bunch of them.
Now, Mexico City's a pretty far cry from Lake, very white, very well-to-do upper-middle-class Lake Forest, Illinois.
Yeah.
What did you encounter? What were some of the images really in your mind of first entering Mexico City?
Well, let's be clear. Even at Lake Forest, I was already an adventurous guy. From a kid growing up in Connecticut, we'd go to rocket ship, shows at the Apollo Theater and Alan Freed. So I got to go into New York as a young teenager, And I always was looking, I guess, for a little bit the wild side, and just let it take me where it took me.
Really, I can't believe that.
So anyhow, we got to Mexico City that first Sunday afternoon, and I remember hanging around the campus, and I ran into a guy. I don't remember his name, but he was an ex-Marine. He had been in Spain. He was going to be a Spanish history professor, and I ended up staying with him at the Mexico City Apartments on the Carretera Mexico Toluca. And there was a little bit of a group of people. There was a guy named Jack Traylor and his wife Donna, who had been with the old Gateway Singers, and actually he had a student when he taught later on named Craig Chautauqua, who became a hot guitar player in Jefferson Airplane. And Jack was always a little bummed that they stole him from his band. But anyhow, I met this guy down in Mexico, and he was an Okie family, had gone west of California, a folk singer from the early days of folk music in California, and he was one of the guys living around in that complex. And then there was a kid named Jim Darby, who was a little kid. These guys were older than me. I was 20. I had to sign my dad's name saying it was okay for me to cross the border because I was going to school. That was one detail we hadn't paid attention to. But this guy Darby had gone to, I think, Roosevelt College, and he's a little tiny guy. He lived on Chicago Avenue, and his brother had been shot or something. He drove his brother out of town, he's in Chicago, and then kept going to Mexico. He also went out on a motorcycle. So these were this group of people. And they were the first gay women lesbians that I was aware of were there, who I later saw in the Clark Theater downtown, the old Clark Theater, a few years later. These were some of the students, and we would go out and visit other towns. There were a lot of other people too. We went up to Toluca, to the ruins, and we went to San Miguel de Allende, and we went to Acapulco, and everywhere I went, I took some photos. There's one photo of an old woman, I don't know how old she was, but Indian woman on the side of the road, and I couldn't remember where it was. I was kind of making up. Was this taken in Ciudad Victoria, or outside of there, in northern Mexico somewhere? But then I realized when I got each time someone would buy one of these pictures, I would print another one that looked on the contact sheet like it might be good. And I printed one because it had a bunch of these people that were students there, including the Delamarter twins, who were these somewhat decadent rich kids from Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. They're kind of wild. We won't talk about some of the things on the show here. But I developed this one picture, and it was us with a flat tire on the way back to San Miguel de Allende on probably a Sunday morning on the side of the road, and I could see from the markings on the side of the road and the road itself where this picture of this woman had been taken. She was obviously up on the hill to my right. So anyhow, I keep coming back to the photos, but it sort of keeps unfolding for me, and it was an important summer. I mean, you had the Partido Revolucionario Internacional, which I thought were the good guys. Now we're kind of opposed to them. But it had the word revolution. That was exciting to me. And I remember we went to Acapulco for the weekend, and we were in Guerrero, which still has kind of guerrilla, army groups down there. There's a lot going on. And there would be signs on the wall that would say, Comunismo sí, Capitalismo no, and Yankee no, Cuba sí, anti-imperialist slogans. And, I had just started to learn about this stuff even in the States. I mean, at Lake Forest, we were really oriented towards civil rights, integrating the barbershops up there, and when the SNCC thing happened a couple years later, we obviously got into civil rights and the peace movement, early stages. But even by 62, I was already kind of into the social issue stuff, and it just kept unfolding. And Mexico helped to do that. We're still talking here, all right.
I'm going to pause because I think this is a really nice time to go and see really done a nice
just
job of
running my mouth.
I know. No, you're doing a great job of describing, giving the atmosphere, like, politically and culturally, what it was like. Can you lead right now? That would be a really nice segue into some of the pictures, like talking about what the political climate was. Do you want to go into talking about the Kennedy shots or some of the other images?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, just ask me about some of the pictures. Talk about some of the pictures.
Okay. So, yes.